Alright, so hi there everyone and welcome back to the channel. So it's been about 10 days I think it is since I got home from Qatar, and I've had a few clear nights and I've taken the opportunity to have a play around, shall we say, but things haven't been going quite to plan. So the RASA in the observatory, the CGX-L mount in there, the guiding problems have returned again. Now, so I don't know if you recall from some of my previous videos where I've touched on this, where the mount won't calibrate and things like that, and yet once again we ended up with problems over the last few nights where I've been trying to get some imaging done, and I've been trying numerous things and getting absolutely nowhere with the mount. It's not so much that that there's a clear decisive problem. It's completely inconsistent in what it's doing, and no amount of tinkering, shall we say, is managing to resolve it. So as I've said, I think on maybe the last video, the one before, I think the mount is due for a strip down, a bearing clean, re-lube, maybe new belts and that sorts of things. But it's certainly become evident over the last 3 imaging sessions that there's definitely something going on, and I just can't put my finger on it. So what I thought I would do today is we'll take a look at the PhD guiding logs, and you'll be able to see how bizarre the behaviour is on the mount. And I've also taken the images from those various sessions, and we'll take a look at them and see what effect that has on the outputs. So one thing to bear in mind is these aren't properly stacked and calibrated images. These are the images that are basically either spat out of the live stacking in Easy Live Stack in PixInsight, or I've just thrown together all the data. So there's 3 images. The first one was from the 30th of December of the Great Orion Nebula, and on the 2nd of January I did the Horsehead and Flame nebulas, and then on the what night was it, 9th of January, I did the Jellyfish Nebula. So we'll start off on the night of the 30th of December, and here we've got the PhD2 log viewer open. So I turned on the mount and everything, set up everything as usual in Nina, got all the camera cooled and all those sorts of things. Did all the autofocuses, checked the autofocus on the guide scope, which I'm using now, a 600mm guide scope, 60mm aperture, I think it is, no, sorry, 80mm aperture, 600mm focal length, and I'm using a Player One Neptune C mono camera for the guide camera. So here we are in PhD log viewer. As I said, I've opened up the log file, and straight away we can see at the start of the evening, so 5 to 7, without doing anything to the calibration on PhD2, basically as it was the last time I used it, it started to go haywire on the declination. So here we can see the scale, the top dotted line is 5 arcsecond error, and the red line is declination and the blue line is the right ascension. And we can see straight away that there was obviously a bit of issues there with the guiding, so I decided to do a calibration. And this is where we can see the first of the real main problems showing themselves. So the red and the blue lines should be 90 degrees to each other ideally, and we're absolutely miles off the mark. And you can see as well on the red steps, the red dots where the steps are, they're all over the place. The right ascension in this case isn't as bad. We do have a bit of spread there, but it isn't as bad as declination. So I don't know what I did then. I tinkered around a bit more, ran another calibration about 8 minutes later, and now you can see that the right ascension and the declination are almost on top of each other, so almost polar opposites from each other. So when we compare them back and forth, you can see over the space of 10 minutes how inconsistent everything is, and the step points are all over the place. So again, with a bit more tinkering, we ended up with a nice 90 degrees, but the declination, we've got this weird stepping, which typically maybe backlash or stiction in the mount, And we do know, or I do know, that the declination on the CGX-L that I've got is very sticky, and it's always been an issue trying to balance it by how sticky it is. So nevertheless, did get this nice 90 degrees with a bit of issues on the declination. So I ran it off in guiding, and it didn't take long to see that there was a couple of big kicks kicking in on the right ascension this time. So I stopped the guiding and did some more calibrations, and you can see the angle is decreased, so we've moved away from the 90, but we've still got this big spread on the declination steps. So kicked off the guiding again, abandoned that guiding, ran another calibration, again the angle's changed yet again, ran off the guiding, abandoned that for whatever reasons, and then I ran it for a longer guiding session. So this was 3 minutes, it's almost 4 minutes of guiding I left it to run just to see what it would do. And as you can see, the blue line, the right ascension, it went way off the scale, so that's over 5 arc seconds before coming back in over some time. And meanwhile, the declination was continuing to drift off towards the bottom of the screen. So stopped it, probably made a couple of changes, did whatever I was doing, ran it again. It was a bit more stable this time, but you know, I was still getting 2.5 second errors on the right ascension on this occasion. So I abandoned that. Tried various different things, and by the end of it, this was the last guiding run. So this was the last guiding run for that session, and we can still see we're getting some big spikes coming in on the right ascension, so it's constantly trying to correct, and also the declination, the red ones, we're getting some large steps as it tries to correct there. But I wasn't particularly happy with the scale of the steps on the peaks and the troughs. So I abandoned guiding that evening, and as I was on the Orion Nebula, which is quite a bright target, I elected instead just to do unguided, just to see how that would come out, and left it for the night unguided on 15-second exposures with 0 gain, and we'll take a look at those images in a minute. So then we move on to the 2nd of January. This is when I moved on to the Horsehead and Flame nebulas, and again we can see the guiding wasn't too bad. I made a couple of changes. We can see along the bottom of the graph where I've made some setting changes. So we've changed the hysteresis aggression, and I've also changed the minimum move and the exposure time I tried, and this is when we can see the yellow and white lines at the top. That's when I've changed the exposure, and adjusted those settings a few times and just left it to see what difference it was making, and wasn't really seeing any real progress in what I was doing over the course of that testing. So that was a 10-minute window we can see there, with little tweaks here and there just to see if it made any noticeable changes or significant changes that maybe point us in the direction of where I'm seeing the errors in the setup. So anyway, it didn't make a great deal. I've got fed up basically tweaking, and if I'd had it longer, maybe we might have seen some improvements, but I was still getting these big kicks, and if I was making such changes on the amount, I've expected to see some more noticeable changes in patterns, a bit like tuning a plant, not a green plant, but an oil plant, when we used to tune valves in the plant and the separation systems and level control and all that sorts of stuff, tweaking the PID settings and various other settings that we used to play around with in the days. And I would have expected to see some changes, but no joy there. So for this one, I was doing 60-second exposures, again with 0 gain on the Horsehead and Flame, and I left the guiding running on this occasion, and there we can see kicked off the guiding session. So this is for over a course of 2 hours 19 minutes, and we can see I've again made some changes to the aggressiveness settings on the right ascension and the deck, and didn't really see anything significantly changing at the front end of the graph. Also increased the exposures back up to 2.5 seconds, and that's why we can see the step change in the yellow and the white lines. Left it to run, and basically after 10 minutes or so I just left it just to see how it would run over the course of the evening. And we can see all the dithering commands coming in, the white diagonal text running up the screen. We get settings failed, settling failed, settling started, settling complete, failed, completed. So we are seeing instability throughout following dithering operation. So then the mount obviously did its meridian flip and continued to run through the evening, and we saw throughout the night that various settling failed post dithers coming in, but no significant improvements at all, and the guiding is all over the place. So the peak to troughs there are typically plus and minus 2.5 arc seconds on the right ascension, and maybe around about 1.5 to 2 seconds arc seconds on the declination. So there was no improvement through the evening, and then as the night went on, I think as we're getting down towards the horizon, we can see that things started to get a little bit worse again at the end of the evening there. So that was the night of the 2nd. So then on the night of the 9th, this was on the Jellyfish Nebula. I spent quite a bit of time messing around again. So kicked off a guiding run, nothing worked. Kicked off another guiding run, and we can see on this occasion, we're getting huge step changes on the right ascension. The blue boxes is the corrections, and the blue line, the solid line, is obviously the right ascension error, and it disappears and comes kicking back and then disappears again. So there's quite a big sweeping change on there, and both the right ascension and deck are constantly trying to correct for the conditions. So I left that running for a while, and towards the end I made some slight changes. So after a period of around about 10 minutes, I made a couple of changes to the aggression on the RA and the deck, just to see how much of a difference that would make, and it didn't really make too much at all. And then you can see at the end there we lost the star, whatever we were doing. So then I did another guiding run, again playing around with settings, trying various things, and we can still continue to see huge errors kicking in, and it appears to run fine, and then we get these huge big sweeps coming through, and you can see on there on the right ascension in particular that it's all over the place. So then I started to do some calibrations, and the bulk of these calibrations actually failed. That's why here we can see the right ascension here. We've just got the straight line up for the right ascension, and then the right ascension is completely in a different direction on the next occasion, and then it flicks back again, and then we're way off at 45 degrees to the right. So we're still getting nowhere really with the calibration. Right ascension just keeps failing out. So kicked off a guiding just to see what would happen. Didn't get a lot of joy there. Kicked off another a couple of calibration runs, and here we can see the right ascension and deck are actually almost 180 degrees to each other instead of the expected 90 degrees. And then we again, with a bit more playing, we start to see a 90 degree coming in, but we've still got this big sweeping issue on the declination in particular, which isn't too great. However, it did calibrate. However, the other thing that I did was, when the last time I had issues with the calibration failing on the CGX-L, I found that when I took off I switched it across to using an ST4 cable using on camera, and it would calibrate fine. So this is exactly what happened on this occasion. I stopped doing it the normal, preferred way, installed an ST4 cable, and it ran a calibration without any issues there. So now we're running on ST4. I left it to run the imaging session, and I wanted to see how far or how much issue we would see in the imaging for long exposures, just to see if that would indicate anything weird through the course of the night on different long exposures. So for the Jellyfish Nebula, I actually had 10-minute exposures running just to see what it would look like at the end. You know, would we get big long star trails? Would I get big jaggy stars? Would I get something bizarre? So I just wanted to see what a 10-minute exposure with these guiding issues would look like. So I ran it. Here's the pre-meridian flip, and again I was tweaking the various aggression and hysteresis settings and minimum moves and exposures just to see if I could try and stabilize things. Declination wasn't too bad. You know, it's not great, but it's certainly not as bad as what we're seeing on the right extension. But I would have expected to see the opposite, you know, considering how much of this big weird sweep that I do see on the calibration curves compared to what we see here. So that is where the guiding was running for the pre-meridian flip, and then it flipped over, and we can see the rest of the night ran the same sort of noise we're seeing on the guiding, with large peak to peaks, and we're talking, you know, plus and minus 2.5 arc seconds on the right ascension, and probably around about plus or minus 1 arc second on the declination. So at the end of that, obviously I'm still no further forward as to what is causing the problems, and I suspect that, yeah, I really need to try and address the stiction issue on the mount as the first point of call, as nothing else seems to be improving the situation. The polar alignment was checked and that was all okay. The balancing's been checked and that's all okay, and I've even tried putting a slight, I think it was east heavy I put on the scope, you know, just enough, just a tiny little bit, but none of that has made any significant improvement on the guiding. So let's take a look at the pictures now that were captured. So if I open up PixInsight, so here is the image that came out from the Orion Nebula. So this was 15-second exposures run through the night. I think there's 230 something exposures in here, and this was taken from the live stack, from Easy Live Stack, and I think I used one Bakshi light frame, flat frame that I had taken at some point just to use as a reference in the live stack, and then I just, you know, did a basic process on it to see how it would come out. You know, we're not talking, obviously, we're not talking about the colours and all these sorts of things. I was just trying to see, you know, how the stars were looking with this being unguided. Okay, so it was 15 seconds, which obviously helps. So if we zoom in, and we can see, yeah, the stars are actually looking, you know, pretty good on a 15-second exposure all through the image, so we don't have any weird back focus issues that I'm aware of on the scope. So that was the Orion Nebula from the night of the 30th of December. So now if we go across to the Horsehead and Flame, so this is how it came out. So these were 60-second exposures, and I was actually quite pleased how this came out. So again, this was taken from Easy Live Stack using the same Bakshi flat frame that I had lying around, so it wasn't, you know, current, shall we say, and then processed to a rough process out of the image from the Easy Live Stack after using it as the starting point. And again, the stars don't look too bad. Yeah, there's a couple of you know, anomalies in the stars, but I suspect that that is due to in the stack of frames there is one or two where there's been a jump in the mount or something like that, and it's obviously carried through into the live stack. So you know, it's only when you really zoom in you can spot it, but just the casual eye, you know, it doesn't look too bad. So that takes us on now to the Jellyfish Nebula. So I chucked together all the raw individual frames that I collected over the various different trials and things. There's no calibration frames in here at all. You know, so you know, ignore the vignetting and the banding that we see around the image, which has always been an issue on this image train that I'm still trying to address as well. And but if we just concentrate on the stars, and again, you know, for 10 minutes of exposures, you know, it's surprised how well, despite all those big guiding errors, how clean the stars look, relatively speaking. And even the detail in the nebula and things like that doesn't look like, you know, you would expect for having 10-minute exposures with large guiding issues on the mount. So I was quite surprised how well that actually came out, considering. So really that's about it. I just wanted to share those issues and some of the normal frustrations that we can get with astrophotography, and be interesting to hear your views. You know, if you get any ideas and things, it's what's causing this complete bizarre behaviour in the mount and why it's so inconsistent, you know, going from one extreme to the other. And you know, 1 minute we can have nice 90-degree angles on the RA and deck, and the next minute they're at the same side, and then the next minute they're at the opposite side. So I really just don't understand this strange behaviour at all. So it'll be interesting to see your comments below and any feedback you've got and things to obviously look at. As I said, I've tried both on camera using an ST4, and I've tried the traditional expected way of doing guiding. I've done calibrations, I've done balancing, I've done polar alignment, the mount's level, you know. So I lost, other than tearing the mount to bits, I'm really at a loss now of which way to go with this mount. So at the moment it's maybe going to be a case of stick to bright unguided objects. So that's where we are. So there we go again. There's the Orion Nebula that was captured, the Horsehead and Flame, and then of course the very rough stack there of the Jellyfish Nebula. Okay, so thanks for watching. I look forward to hearing from you, and take care and clear skies everyone. Catch you in the next one.